Father Michael Walsh had seen many couples come and go through the doors of St. Catherine's Church over his 25 years as a priest. Some were clearly in love, while others seemed to be going through the motions. But when he first met Robert and Anna, he felt something special about them. Robert Miller was a local businessman who owned 3 hardware stores in town. He had been a regular at Sunday services for years, always sitting in the third row, always putting a $20 bill in the collection basket. Anna Chen was new to the congregation. She had moved to town just 6 months ago to work as a nurse at Memorial Hospital. "They make such a beautiful couple," Mrs. Peterson, the church secretary, often remarked whenever Robert and Anna came for their pre-wedding meetings. Father Michael agreed. Robert, with his tall frame and kind blue eyes, seemed to complement Anna's petite figure and warm smile perfectly. They had come to him 3 months ago, hand in hand, asking if he would officiate their wedding. "We want a traditional ceremony," Robert had said, squeezing Anna's hand. "Something meaningful and sacred." Anna had nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, something we'll remember forever." Father Michael noticed that Anna spoke with a slight accent. She had mentioned growing up in a small town outside of Shanghai before moving to America for nursing school 10 years ago. Her English was excellent, though sometimes she struggled with certain religious terms during their meetings. "I'm still learning about Catholicism," she admitted during one of their premarital counseling sessions. "My family was not religious, but I want to embrace Robert's faith." Her eagerness to learn touched Father Michael. He gave her books about Catholic traditions and was impressed when she came back with thoughtful questions. Robert beamed with pride whenever Anna demonstrated her growing knowledge. As the wedding day approached, St. Catherine's Church buzzed with activity. The Women's Guild decorated the altar with white roses and lilies. The choir practiced wedding hymns. Mrs. Peterson printed the programs that listed the wedding party. Robert's brother as best man, Anna's cousin as maid of honor, and 4 friends as bridesmaids and groomsmen. "Everything is coming together beautifully," Father Michael told the couple at their final meeting, 1 week before the wedding. But that same evening, something unusual happened. Father Michael was locking up the church when he noticed a woman standing in the shadows near the statue of Mary. At first, he thought it might be Anna, coming back for forgotten papers. But as he approached, he realized this woman was older, perhaps in her 50s. "Can I help you?" Father Michael asked. The woman jumped slightly. "I'm sorry, Father, I was just praying." She had the same accent as Anna. "The church is always open for prayer, but it's getting late," he said gently. The woman nodded and moved toward the door. But before leaving, she turned back. "You're performing the Miller-Chen wedding next weekend, yes?" Father Michael was surprised. "Yes. Do you know the couple?" "I know of them," she said carefully. "It will be a memorable ceremony, I'm sure." Something in her tone made Father Michael uneasy. The woman left before he could ask more questions, the heavy church door closing behind her with a significant thud. That night, Father Michael couldn't sleep. The woman's words played in his mind. There was something in her eyes, a sadness, perhaps, or a warning. He told himself he was being silly. After all, weddings often brought out strange emotions in people. Little did he know that this encounter was just the beginning of what would become the most unusual wedding in all his years as a priest. 1 week before the wedding, the church was busy with preparations. Mrs. Peterson arranged flowers while the choir practiced wedding songs. Father Michael sat in his office, reviewing his notes for the ceremony, when there was a knock at his door. "Come in," he called. Anna entered, wearing a simple blue dress and carrying a small notebook. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Father," she said with her gentle smile. "Not at all, Anna. Please, sit down." Father Michael gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Is everything all right? Wedding jitters?" No, Anna said quickly. "Everything is perfect. I just wanted to go over some details about the ceremony again." Father Michael nodded. Anna had been thorough about planning every aspect of the wedding. Robert had joked that she had spreadsheets for her spreadsheets. "I was wondering," Anna began, "about the part where you ask if anyone objects to the marriage. Is that really necessary?" Father Michael raised an eyebrow. "It's traditional, though rarely does anyone actually object." "Could we skip it?" Anna asked, looking down at her hands. It seemed so old-fashioned. "I suppose we could," Father Michael said slowly. "May I ask why it concerns you?" Anna laughed lightly, but Father Michael noticed it didn't reach her eyes. Oh, it's silly. I just saw a movie where someone objected at a wedding, and it was so embarrassing for everyone. Father Michael studied her face. For someone about to marry the love of her life, Anna seemed unusually tense. I understand, he said. But Robert mentioned wanting a traditional ceremony. Let me think about it. Anna nodded, though she looked disappointed. She changed the subject quickly. Also, I was wondering about the lighting. The afternoon sun comes through the stained glass so beautifully. I'd like to make sure we capture that in the photos. They discussed a few more details, and then Anna left. Father Michael watched her walk away, noticing how she paused to look at the statues of saints, particularly St. Catherine, the church's namesake. Later that afternoon, Father Michael was surprised to see Robert arrive alone for their final meeting before the wedding. Anna couldn't make it. Father Michael asked. She had a shift at the hospital she couldn't get out of, Robert explained. She sends her apologies. No problem at all, Father Michael assured him. Actually, Anna came by earlier with some questions about the ceremony. Did she? Robert seemed surprised. I thought she was working all day. Father Michael felt a small twinge of concern. She mentioned wanting to skip the part where I ask if anyone objects to the marriage. Robert frowned. That's odd. She's the one who wanted everything to be traditional. She even insisted on using my grandmother's wedding Bible for the readings. Perhaps she's just nervous, Father Michael suggested. Weddings bring out all sorts of emotions. Maybe, Robert agreed, but he looked troubled. Did she say anything else unusual? Father Michael hesitated. Not really. Although, he paused, unsure if he should continue. What is it, Father? Robert prompted. It's probably nothing, but I've noticed Anna seems uncomfortable during parts of our premarital counseling, especially when we discuss Catholic traditions. Robert nodded. She's still learning. Her family wasn't religious, but she's been studying Catholicism to understand my faith better. She even bought books about it. Father Michael smiled. That's admirable. After Robert left, Father Michael walked through the church, checking that everything was ready for the weekend. As he passed the confessional, he noticed someone kneeling at the altar, a middle-aged Asian woman he didn't recognize. Excuse me, he said gently. May I help you? The woman turned, startled. I'm sorry, Father. I was just praying. You're welcome to pray here anytime, Father Michael assured her. Are you here for the wedding this weekend? A strange expression crossed the woman's face. The Chen Miller wedding? Yes, I might attend. Are you a friend of the bride or groom? The woman hesitated. I knew Anna a long time ago. Before Father Michael could ask more questions, the woman hurried toward the exit. As she reached the door, she turned back. Father, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, sometimes people are not who they seem to be. With that cryptic statement, she was gone, leaving Father Michael with an uneasy feeling that something was not right about the upcoming wedding. That night, as he prepared for bed, Father Michael found himself thinking about Anna's request to skip the objection part of the ceremony, Robert's surprise at her visit, and the mysterious woman's warning. He tried to dismiss his concerns, but sleep didn't come easily. The night before the wedding, Father Michael couldn't sleep. The church was ready, decorated with white flowers and silk ribbons. The organist had practiced the wedding march several times. Everything seemed perfect, but something still bothered him. At 11:30 p.m., just as he was about to turn off his bedside lamp, his phone rang. Father Michael didn't recognize the number, but he answered anyway. As a priest, late-night calls were sometimes emergencies. Hello, Father Michael speaking. There was silence, then a woman's voice, barely above a whisper. Father, I need to talk to you about tomorrow's wedding. Father Michael sat up straight. Who is this? That's not important, the woman said. Her accent was similar to Anna's, but her voice sounded older. What's important is that you must stop that wedding. I'm sorry, but I can't discuss my parishioners with strangers, Father Michael said firmly. If you have concerns, you should come to the church tomorrow and... There won't be time tomorrow, the woman interrupted. The woman Robert is marrying, she is not who she claims to be. A chill ran down Father Michael's spine as he remembered the mysterious woman at the church. What do you mean? Her name is not Anna Chen. The real Anna Chen died 2 years ago in a car accident in California. Father Michael's hand tightened around the phone. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any proof? Check her left wrist, the woman said. The real Anna had a small butterfly tattoo there. This woman covers it with makeup and bracelets. And you know this because? Because I knew the real Anna. This woman is using her identity. Her real name is Lin Wei. She was Anna's roommate in nursing school. When Anna died, Lin took her papers, her identity, her life. Father Michael's mind raced. He had noticed Anna always wore bracelets, even during casual meetings. And there was something else. She avoided certain topics about her past, always changing the subject when Robert mentioned her nursing school days. But why would she do this? What does she want with Robert? The woman on the phone sighed. Robert's family has money. His hardware stores are just the beginning. His uncle left him land worth millions. Lin, she has always wanted a better life than the one she had in China. If what you're saying is true, I need to contact the police, Father Michael said. No, the woman sounded frightened. If you call the police now, she'll run. She's done it before. You need to catch her at the wedding, when she can't escape easily. Father Michael wasn't sure if he should believe this stranger, but then she said something that made his blood run cold. If you don't believe me, ask her about the scar on her back. Anna had a surgery when she was 12, a spinal procedure that left a 6-inch scar. This woman doesn't have it. Father Michael remembered something from last week. During a rehearsal, Anna had worn a backless dress. Robert had placed his hand on her bare back, and Father Michael had noticed the smooth skin. There was no scar. Who are you? Father Michael asked again. Someone who cares about justice, the woman replied. Someone who can't stand by and watch this happen to a good man like Robert. Before Father Michael could ask more questions, the line went dead. He stared at his phone for a long time, then got out of bed and knelt to pray. Was this mysterious caller telling the truth? Or was this some kind of jealous interference? Father Michael thought about Anna, her hesitation with certain personal questions, her vague answers about her past, the way she sometimes looked over her shoulder as if expecting to see someone. For the first time in his priesthood, he wondered if he should refuse to perform a wedding. But he needed more than a stranger's phone call. He needed proof. As dawn broke, Father Michael made a decision. He would not call the police yet, he would not alarm Robert. But he would watch Anna carefully at the wedding. And he would look for that butterfly tattoo on her wrist. Whatever happened today, Father Michael knew the wedding would not go as planned. The morning of the wedding arrived with perfect blue skies and gentle sunshine. By noon, St. Catherine's Church was buzzing with activity. The flower girls practiced throwing rose petals down the aisle. The best man kept checking his pocket for the rings. Robert stood in a side room, adjusting his tie in a small mirror. Father Michael knocked gently on the door. May I come in? Father, yes, please, Robert said, turning with a broad smile. How do I look? Very handsome, Father Michael said, noticing how Robert's hands trembled slightly. Nervous? A little, Robert admitted. But happy. I can't believe I'm finally marrying Anna. Sometimes I think I'm the luckiest man alive. Father Michael's heart sank. The anonymous caller's words echoed in his mind. Could Robert be marrying an impostor, a woman who had stolen someone else's identity? Robert, Father Michael began carefully, I've been meaning to ask you. How did you and Anna meet? Robert's face lit up. At the hospital, I was visiting my cousin after his surgery, and Anna was his nurse. She was so kind, so attentive. I left my number on a napkin like some teenager. He laughed. I never thought she'd call, but she did. And you've met her family? Robert's smile faltered slightly. No. Her parents passed away years ago, and her brother lives in China. Too far to travel for the wedding, unfortunately. Convenient, Father Michael thought. No family to expose her. One more question, Father Michael said. Does Anna have any birthmarks or scars? Something distinctive? Robert looked confused. That's an odd question, Father. Just curious, Father Michael said lightly. Sometimes these details come up in wedding toasts. Well, she has this cute little butterfly tattoo on her wrist, Robert said. She got it in college, her wild phase, she calls it. He chuckled. Why do you ask? Father Michael felt a jolt. The caller had mentioned a butterfly tattoo. but said the real Anna had it, not the impostor. Had the caller been wrong, or deliberately misleading him? No reason, Father Michael said, forcing a smile. I should check on the bride. It's almost time. On the other side of the church, Anna sat in the bridal room, surrounded by bridesmaids. When Father Michael knocked, the women giggled and hurried to cover Anna's dress, citing bad luck if the groom's representative saw it. Father Michael, Anna said warmly, is everything okay? Just checking if you need anything, he replied, studying her carefully. Anna wore a bracelet on her left wrist, a delicate silver chain with small pearls. It could easily cover a tattoo. I'm perfect, she said. Just ready to become Mrs. Miller. One of the bridesmaids adjusted Anna's veil. This is so romantic. You two are perfect together. Father Michael noticed Anna's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Was it just wedding nerves, or something else? Anna, may I speak with you alone for a moment? Father Michael asked. A brief prayer before the ceremony. The bridesmaids exchanged glances but filed out of the room. When they were alone, Father Michael closed the door. Is something wrong, Father? Anna asked, her voice steady but her eyes watchful. I received a concerning phone call last night, he said directly. About you. Anna's face paled slightly. About me? What did they say? They suggested you might not be who you claim to be. Anna stared at him for a long moment, then let out a small laugh. That's ridiculous. Who would say such a thing? They mentioned a butterfly tattoo, Father Michael said, watching her reaction carefully. Anna lifted her wrist and removed the bracelet. There, on her skin, was a small blue butterfly. This one? I've had it for years. Robert knows all about it. Father Michael frowned. This didn't match what the caller had told him. Was he being played, or was Anna very clever? They'd also mentioned a scar on your back, or rather, the lack of one. Now Anna's expression changed. Something flashed in her eyes, fear, anger. She opened her mouth to respond when there was a knock at the door. 5 minutes, everyone. Mrs. Peterson called through the door. Anna stood up, smoothing her dress. We should continue this conversation after the ceremony, Father. My future husband is waiting. As she walked past him, Father Michael noticed something that made his blood run cold. Anna's hands were steady, her walk confident. This was not a nervous bride. This was a woman with a plan. And he was now certain that plan did not include Robert's happiness. The wedding ceremony began with the traditional music of Canon in D. Guests stood as the bridesmaids walked down the aisle in pale blue dresses, each carrying a small bouquet of white roses. Robert waited at the altar, his face glowing with happiness and anticipation. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for. The organist switched to the wedding march, and the doors at the back of the church opened. Anna stood there in a stunning white gown, her face partially hidden behind a delicate veil. A collective gasp rose from the guests. She was beautiful. Father Michael watched her closely as she made her way down the aisle. Her steps were measured, graceful. She moved like someone who had rehearsed this moment many times in her mind. When she reached the altar, Robert took her hand, his eyes shining with tears of joy. You look incredible, he whispered, loud enough that Father Michael could hear. Anna smiled up at him. So do you. Father Michael began the ceremony, his mind racing. The butterfly tattoo existed, contrary to what the mysterious caller had said, but the scar on her back did not. Something was wrong, but he wasn't sure what to do. Dearly beloved, Father Michael began, we are gathered here today in the sight of God and this company to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. As he spoke the familiar words, Father Michael noticed Anna glancing toward the back of the church several times. Was she looking for someone? Expecting something? He continued with the ceremony, leading the couple through the initial prayers and readings. A friend of Robert's read a passage from Corinthians about love being patient and kind. Anna's supposed cousin read a poem about two lives joining as one. Then came the moment of truth. If anyone can show just cause why this couple cannot lawfully be joined together in matrimony, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Father Michael paused, looking out at the congregation. The church was silent. He glanced at Anna, who was staring straight ahead, her jaw clenched slightly. Just as Father Michael was about to continue, the church doors opened. A woman in a simple blue dress walked in. She was Asian, like Anna, but older, perhaps in her 50s. Father Michael recognized her immediately as the woman he had seen praying in the church and strongly suspected she was the anonymous caller. "I object," the woman said, her voice clear and strong. Gasps and murmurs filled the church. Robert turned, his face a mask of confusion. "Who are you?" he asked. The woman walked halfway down the aisle. "My name is Grace Chen. Anna Chen was my niece." Anna's face had gone white. She clutched her bouquet so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Was?" Robert asked, his voice shaking. "Anna Chen died 2 years ago in a car accident in San Francisco," Grace said. "This woman is not my niece." All eyes turned to Anna, who was now visibly trembling. "This is absurd," Anna said. "I don't know who this woman is. She's clearly confused or—" "Show them your shoulder," Grace interrupted. The real Anna had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her left shoulder. "Every Chen woman in our family has it." Father Michael stepped forward. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion privately." "No," Robert said firmly. "I want to know the truth." He turned to Anna. "Is this true? Are you not who you say you are?" Anna looked around the church, at the shocked faces of the guests, at the hard expression of Grace Chen, at the confusion and pain in Robert's eyes. For a moment, she seemed to be calculating something in her mind. Then, without warning, she dropped her bouquet and ran. She made it halfway down the aisle before the church's security guard, who had been alerted by Mrs. Peterson, stepped into her path. Anna tried to dodge around him, but he caught her arm. "Let go of me," she screamed, struggling against his grip. "Someone call the police," Father Michael said, his voice cutting through the chaos. Robert stood frozen at the altar, watching the woman he thought he knew fighting to escape. The look on his face broke Father Michael's heart, the slow realization that everything might have been a lie. Anna, or whoever she was, stopped struggling suddenly. She looked back at Robert, her eyes no longer frightened but cold and calculating. "You don't understand," she said. "None of you understand what I've been through." The church was silent now, everyone holding their breath, waiting for what would happen next. And Father Michael knew that the real shock was yet to come. The next hour passed in a blur of confusion and shock. The police arrived quickly, their sirens cutting through the wedding music that still played softly in the background. The guests were asked to remain seated while officers took statements from Father Michael, Grace Chen, and Robert. Anna, or whoever she really was, sat in a small office at the back of the church, guarded by 2 officers. She had stopped fighting, and now sat in silence, her beautiful wedding dress pulled around her like a deflated dream. "I want to talk to her," Robert said, his voice hollow. His best man stood beside him, a hand on his shoulder for support. "Are you sure that's wise?" Father Michael asked gently. "I need to know the truth," Robert insisted. "I need to hear it from her." The lead detective, a woman named Officer Martinez, nodded after a moment's consideration. "You can have 5 minutes, but I'll be in the room with you." When Robert entered the office, the woman who had almost become his wife didn't look up. Her makeup was smeared from crying, but her posture remained straight, almost defiant. "Who are you?" Robert asked simply. She finally raised her eyes to meet his. "My name is Lin Wei." "And Anna?" "The real Anna." Lin's eyes flashed with something, regret, perhaps, or just calculation. "She was my roommate in nursing school. We were friends. Grace says she died in a car accident." Lin nodded slowly. 2 years ago. She was driving home from a night shift. It was raining. And you just took her identity." Robert's voice cracked. "Why?" Lin looked down at her hands, at the engagement ring that sparkled on her finger. "Hannah had everything I wanted. A secure job in America. A good reputation. No family complications. When she died, I saw an opportunity." "So none of it was real?" Robert asked, his face a mask of pain. "Everything between us was a lie?" For the first time, Lin's composure broke slightly. "Not everything. I do care for you, Robert. That wasn't part of the plan, but it happened." Officer Martinez stepped forward. "What was the plan, Ms. Wei?" Lin hesitated, then seemed to realize there was no point in hiding anything now. "Marriage. American citizenship. Financial security." She glanced at Robert. "Your family has money. I grew up with nothing." But why here? Father Michael asked from the doorway. There are many wealthy men in this country. Why choose this town, this man? It wasn't random, Lynn admitted. After Anna died, I found her journal. She had written about her hometown, about a boy she knew in high school that she always had a crush on. She looked at Robert. You never noticed me back then, did you? I was the quiet exchange student who sat behind you in English class for one semester. But Anna noticed you. She kept track of you on social media. When I saw you were still single, successful, Robert's face paled as understanding dawned. You used Anna's memories to get close to me, her personal thoughts? I needed a connection that would seem natural, Lynn said. I needed a backstory that would hold up if anyone asked questions. And it might have worked, Officer Martinez said, if not for Grace Chen. Lynn's expression hardened. I didn't know Anna had an aunt in California. Anna rarely spoke about her family. She found your nursing license online, Grace said, stepping into the crowded office. The real one, with your real name. She was looking for her niece's information and found a photo of you using Anna's credentials. It took her months to track me down. Father Michael watched as the full weight of Lynn's deception crashed down on Robert. The man who had stood at the altar just an hour ago, ready to pledge his life to this woman, now looked lost, betrayed. You'll be charged with identity theft at minimum, Officer Martinez told Lynn. Possibly fraud, depending on what else we uncover in our investigation. Lynn nodded, seeming resigned to her fate. As the officers prepared to take her to the station, she looked up at Robert one last time. For what it's worth, she said quietly, these last 6 months were the happiest of my life. Robert turned away without answering, walking past Father Michael and out into the church where his confused and concerned friends and family waited. The wedding that never was had ended, but the story of Lynn Y's deception was just beginning to unfold. The days following the wedding disaster passed in a haze of statements, questions, and revelations. Lynn Y was held in the county jail, charged with identity theft, fraud, and falsifying government documents. The local newspaper ran the story on the front page. Wedding stopped, bride revealed as impostor. Father Michael visited Robert at his home 3 days after the failed ceremony. A house, which had been prepared for the newlyweds' return from their honeymoon, was now eerily quiet. Wedding gifts sat unopened in a corner. How are you holding up? Father Michael asked, accepting the cup of coffee Robert offered. I don't know, Robert answered honestly. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm just numb. I keep thinking I should have known. How did I not see it? She was very convincing. Father Michael said gently. She fooled everyone, not just you. Robert stared out the window. I've been going through old photos, things she told me about her past, about her childhood. None of it was real. He paused. And yet, our time together, that felt real. How do I make sense of that? Father Michael had no easy answers. Sometimes people can start with bad intentions but develop real feelings along the way. It doesn't excuse what she did, but... The police found Anna's journal in Lynn's apartment. Robert interrupted. They let me read parts of it. His voice cracked. Anna really did have a crush on me in high school. She wrote about hoping to come back to town someday, maybe run into me again. I'm so sorry, Robert. The real Anna died never knowing I would have liked her too. Robert's eyes filled with tears. Instead, I fell in love with someone using her memories, her feelings, her life. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Robert wiped his eyes quickly and went to answer it. Father Michael heard a woman's voice, then Robert's surprised response. He returned to the living room with Grace Chen. Miss Chen, Father Michael greeted her. I didn't expect to see you again so soon. Grace nodded politely. I'm flying back to California tomorrow, but I wanted to speak with Robert first. She sat down across from them, placing a small box on the coffee table. These belonged to my niece, the real Anna. Her personal items were sent to me after the accident. I thought you might want to see who she really was. Robert stared at the box, not reaching for it. I don't know if I can. It might help, Grace said softly. Anna was a wonderful person, kind, smart, dedicated to her patients. She deserved to be remembered as herself, not as the identity that woman stole. Slowly, Robert opened the box. Inside were photos, a nurse's pin, a few pieces of jewelry, and a small leather-bound journal. This is her last journal, Grace explained. The one Lynn didn't get. Anna wrote about you in there too, about seeing your Facebook posts, wondering if you remembered her. Robert picked up a photo of a smiling young woman in nursing scrubs. She looked similar to Lynn, but her smile was different, warmer, more genuine. She was beautiful. Yes, Grace agreed. Beautiful inside and out. Father Michael watched as Robert carefully looked through each item, pieces of a life cut tragically short and then stolen. It was a strange form of grief. Mourning someone he hadn't really known, yet who had, in some twisted way, brought him and Lynn together. The detective called this morning, Robert said after a while. Lynn is cooperating with the investigation. She's identified other people involved in an identity theft ring. Apparently, she paid someone $10,000 for Anna's social security number and medical credentials. Grace shook her head sadly. Such a waste, if she'd put that energy into her own life instead of stealing my niece's. She told them she was planning to divorce me after getting citizenship, Robert continued, his voice flat. Take half of everything and disappear. Father Michael placed a hand on Robert's shoulder, but she didn't go through with it. She seemed genuinely upset when everything fell apart. That doesn't change what she did, Grace said firmly. No, Robert agreed, but it makes me wonder if people can change. If even in the middle of a terrible plan, real feelings can grow. As Father Michael prepared to leave, he noticed Robert carefully arranging the real Anna's photos on his mantel, next to the returned engagement ring that now had no owner. The wedding might have been stopped, but the story of these intertwined lives was far from over. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer, and summer faded into autumn. The scandal of the wedding that never was had mostly died down in town, replaced by newer gossip and stories. But for those directly involved, the effects lingered. Father Michael was preparing the church for Sunday service when he noticed Robert sitting alone in the back pew. He hadn't seen him at Mass for several months. Robert, Father Michael said, sitting beside him. It's good to see you. Robert nodded, his face thinner than before but more peaceful. I needed some time away, from everything. Understandable, Father Michael replied. How have you been? Better, I think, Robert said. I closed 2 of my stores and sold the land my uncle left me. Father Michael raised his eyebrows in surprise. That's a big change. I realized I was working so hard to build something, but I didn't know what for. Robert smiled faintly. The money is funding a nursing scholarship at the community college. In Anna's name, the real Anna. That's wonderful, Father Michael said, genuinely touched. I'm sure Grace Chen would be moved by that gesture. She was. We stayed in touch. Robert paused. She's become like family to me, in a strange way. We both lost someone, even though I never actually knew Anna. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Robert spoke again. I saw Lynn yesterday. Father Michael couldn't hide his surprise. At the jail? No, she's out now. She took a plea deal, testified against the bigger players in the identity theft ring. Got her sentence reduced to time served plus probation. Robert ran a hand through his hair. She's working at a restaurant downtown, using her real name, trying to start over. How did that meeting go? Strange, sad, necessary. Robert looked down at his hands. I needed to hear her say she was sorry, and she needed to say it. She cried. I think she meant it. And did you forgive her? Father Michael asked gently. Robert thought for a moment. Not completely. Maybe I never will, but I'm not angry anymore. That's something, isn't it? Father Michael nodded. It's a lot, actually. She told me something interesting, Robert continued. When she was in jail, she read through all of Anna's journals. The police had them as evidence. She said she started feeling like she knew the real Anna, started respecting her as a person rather than just seeing her as an identity to steal. People can change, Father Michael said. That's what I'm counting on, Robert replied. I've changed too. I'm more careful now, but I'm trying not to be cynical. He hesitated. I've actually met someone new, a teacher at the high school. We're taking things very slowly. Father Michael smiled. I'm glad to hear that. You deserve happiness, Robert. As they stood up, Robert looked toward the altar where, 6 months ago, his life had changed so dramatically. You know, it's strange. If you hadn't noticed those inconsistencies, if Grace hadn't shown up, I would be married to Lynn now. living a life built on lies. Sometimes the hardest moments lead us where we need to go, Father Michael observed. Robert nodded. I signed up to volunteer at Memorial Hospital next month, in the same ward where the real Anna worked. He smiled sadly. I want to honor her memory somehow. She deserves that. As Robert walked out of the church, Father Michael noticed a woman watching from across the street. It was Lynn, her hair now cut short, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater. She didn't approach Robert, just watched him walk to his car with an expression that mixed regret and acceptance. When she noticed Father Michael observing her, she gave a small nod of acknowledgement before turning and walking away. Father Michael returned to preparing the church, reflecting on how a single moment, his decision to question the bride, had changed so many lives. He thought about identity, truth, deception, and forgiveness. Some stories ended neatly, with clear villains and heroes, but in real life, the lines were rarely so clear. The wedding he had stopped had brought pain, but from that pain, something honest had finally begun to grow.